The Alaska illusion. Here's Alaska as you usually see it on world maps, a massive frozen territory that appears almost as large as the entire lower 48 states. But here's the reality when we take Alaska off the Mercator projection and place it over the continental United States. Suddenly, it shrinks to just about 1/3 the size we're used to seeing. The Mercator projection shows Alaska at 2.5 times its actual proportion relative to the contiguous U.S. Where it looked like a giant northern continent, it actually fits entirely within the Midwest when scaled correctly. This visual distortion happens because the Mercator projection stretches areas closer to the poles to preserve straight lines for navigation. Watch what happens when we digitally unwrap Alaska from the Mercator distortion. The state's polar regions compress vertically while maintaining their true east-west dimensions. The Aleutian Islands that appeared stretched out on standard maps now show their actual clustered formation. The result is an Alaska that measures approximately 1,400 miles from north to south, not the exaggerated 2,200 miles the projection suggests. This distortion affects how we perceive everything from Alaska's climate to its strategic importance. Most people imagine Alaska as this massive frozen wasteland because maps show it sprawling across the top of our mental image of North America. In reality, Anchorage sits at a lower latitude than Oslo, Norway. The southernmost point of Alaska actually extends further south than London. Consider a traveler flying from Seattle to Anchorage, expecting a cross-continental journey. They're surprised when the flight takes just 3.5 hours, the same duration as Chicago to Los Angeles. If Alaska were truly the size it appears on Mercator maps, that same flight would take nearly 6 hours. Even internal flights defy expectations. Anchorage to Barrow takes less time than crossing Texas. The standard Mercator projection makes Alaska appear to cover about 17% of total U.S. land area, when it actually comprises just 10%. That's a difference of nearly 300,000 square miles in visual representation versus reality. When scaled properly, Alaska could comfortably fit within the combined areas of Texas, California, and Montana. The projection particularly exaggerates northern features like the Brooks Range and North Slope. These areas appear disproportionately large compared to southern Alaska's Panhandle region. In reality, the distance from the Arctic coast to the southern islands is about the same as from Seattle to San Diego, but the map stretches this to look more like Seattle to Mexico City. This distortion affects how we view population distribution too. About half of Alaska's residents live in the Anchorage area, which appears unusually compressed on Mercator maps. The state's road system concentrates in the south near population centers, not spread evenly across the massive landmass the maps suggest exists. The water surrounding Alaska suffers similar exaggeration. The Bering Sea appears impossibly wide on standard maps, when in reality the distance from Nome to Russia's Chukotka Peninsula measures just 55 miles. Commercial shipping lanes follow much more reasonable paths than the sprawling blue expanses on Mercator maps would suggest. Why does this matter? Because our mental maps influence everything from travel plans to resource allocation. Students learning geography absorb the misconception that Alaska is nearly the size of the continental U.S. Policymakers may overestimate transportation challenges based on the false distances. Even military strategists must compensate for the projection size distortions when calculating response times or supply lines. What's particularly fascinating is how this distortion developed. Gerardus Mercator designed his 1569 projection primarily for nautical navigation, not for political geography. Sailors needed straight lines that maintained constant compass bearings, not accurate landmass proportions. The system worked perfectly for crossing oceans, but accidentally created these size illusions that persist in our collective imagination. Now that you've seen how maps dramatically exaggerate Alaska's size, you'll start noticing similar distortions everywhere. The next section will reveal how Texas, another famously huge state, actually measures up against its international counterparts, proving that sometimes seeing isn't always believing when it comes to world maps.